Hey guys, Darth Keen here, hope you're all well. In today's video I'm going to be starting a new series where I talk about some of the species that are seen in Star Wars and in the Star Wars universe. So in today's video I want to have a chat about the extinct species that are seen in Jedi Fallen Order, and that is the Zeffo. So we know that the Zeffo play a pivotal role at the very start of the game when Cal travels to the temple on Bogano and hears the recordings of Master Cordova, and this leads us to the Zeffo planet. Now of course at the start of the game you could choose to either go to Dathomir or to go to Zeffo, but they both actually have Zeffo tombs on them. So from the Jedi Fallen Order game we know some things about the Zeffo, what happened to them and why they actually ended up being extinct. So the Zeffo were a peaceful civilization. Many of them could actually use the Force, but they didn't call it the Force, they actually called it the life wind. And this is because the planet itself actually experienced these really powerful magnetic winds, or electromagnetic winds. So they just thought it was kind of a part of this. So in the Zeffo history, we know from the game that there was 3 tombs of Zeffo sages, Iolram, Mictrol and Kujet. And these sages were basically just force-wielding Zephos, but they actually ruled the Zeffo planet. So I'm just going to have a quick chat about the 3 sages themselves, because once you hear about their personalities and what their lives were actually like, it explains the downfall of the Zeffo themselves. So starting off with Iolram, we know he was the earliest one, and he was revered by the Zephos for being wise, and he was actually a master of the life wind, or the Force. We know he had a great interest in nature and was the first to establish communication with the Wookiees on Kashyyyk. Now this is said in the game, and it actually leads you to Kashyyyk once you visit Iolram's tomb. So he was a great leader, very revered by all of the Zephos at the time. And that leads us on to the next Zeffo sage that we know about, and that was Mictrol. Now Mictrol was described as a very powerful being and very strong in the Force. I think they describe him as unending power in the life Force, or in the life wind. So a very powerful being, but he was arrogant and he demanded offerings from his people. We know this because we see it in the tomb itself in the game. During Mictrol's reign, the decline of the Zeffo had actually begun. We can see that he wasn't as good of a leader as Iolram was before him, and we can see special torches actually in his tomb called votive candles, and these were placed in the tomb as a symbol of his legendary power. But because he was arrogant, it shows us that this is the start of how the Zephos went from being a peaceful civilization to being corrupted by the dark side of the Force, and this was just a step in that direction. So the next Zeffo sage that we know about is Kujet, and he was the most evil of the 3 sages. He was actually a ruthless authoritarian, and he was completely corrupted by the dark side of the Force, and actually his palace and tomb are both located on Dathomir, which we know is a planet that is shrouded in dark, and the dark side of the Force. So he actually ordered the destruction of astriums, which are these kind of religious objects that the Zephos used doing religious practices. We also know that when a Force user wields an astrium, they are then able to gain access to Zeffo vaults and stuff like that. He promised his followers control over the Force if they supported him and his reign, but he actually betrayed them and even massacred some of his followers. But he also massacred any resistance to his reign, so he massacred enemies and friends alike. So he was just an awful, awful person, and his reign marked the decline of the Zeffo. Now we know from the game that Cal Kestis actually finds a recording of a Zeffo sage. Now we don't know who this guy is, but he basically explains that the Zepho's downfall was caused by dogma, or they became so obsessed with the rules of their teachings that they actually were blinded to the meanings behind them. So this caused their pride to corrupt them, and this ultimately led to their downfall. Now we also hear from this sage that he leads the last remnants of the Zeffo into the great unknown. Now we don't actually know what this means. This could mean he leads them to their death, or maybe he leads them to a place like the Outer Rim or somewhere where they have a fresh start on a new planet, which is what I would like to think happened to them. And I would love to think that we could see them in a future project, maybe even in the sequel to the Fallen Order. But I think it's a real shame if we just have the Zephos in the one game and then that's it. So what have we learned from the downfall of the Zeffo? Well, for one, it was very dramatic, and a civilization that was once known as being a very peaceful, nature-driven place turned so corrupt that it actually led to the extinction of the species on the planet. The The story of the Zeffo also illustrates how power can corrupt anyone, no matter how benevolent of being you are from the start. As we know that the Zeffo were a peaceful civilization, as I've said, they loved nature, they were a very good civilization, very technologically advanced, but none of that mattered because they became power hungry and power driven, and that it will always lead to the demise of any species who aren't prepared to deal with power when it's made available to them. So yeah guys, that's going to be the end of today's video. I hope you did enjoy. Leave a comment if you want me to cover any particular species from the Star Wars universe. I'd really appreciate if you could leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. And yeah guys, I'll talk to you in the next one.